Hello and welcome. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. If you want to say hello in the chat box, let us know where you're joining us from. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. Please continue to introduce yourself in the chat box. This webinar is being recorded. A link will be made available on NSLA's website. With that, Aaron.
Well, thank you, Leslie, and welcome everyone to our second annual National Summer Learning Association Summer Planning Bootcamp. I know a lot of people are logging on. We have a great agenda today and tomorrow as well. And as all of you are now getting prepared, sitting here at the end of March for what we're going to do with young people this summer, we have been asked, and we've been all like you working tirelessly all throughout COVID, but we have a great session on the impact of COVID on kids and what the data tells us, followed about experts talking about staff and student recruitment. What we wanted to do with this boot camp is highlight the 4 biggest topics people are asking us about and asking us to present on all the time, and put them all in one place so everyone can at least get all this information at one time, as opposed to us doing 2,000 webinars all across America. So this session today is being sponsored by Scholastic, our friends from Scholastic, who you're going to hear from in a second. And we have some of the biggest national leaders and experts about this topic, and we're especially what has been going on and the impact on kids. So you're going to hear from them in a moment. Next slide, Leslie. So just again, for those of you who don't know, National Summer Learning Association, NSLA, we work for you. We are a resource to you in areas of program quality, building partnerships, public policy, public awareness, and leadership development. You can go on our website, summerlearning.org, to learn more, but we are a broad coalition of 15,000 leaders. We hear some background from some others. If you could put on mute. You know, we represent school districts and education agencies and nonprofit organizations, youth-serving government agencies and nature-based programs and summer youth employment programs. Anyone running a program for low-income kids in the summer, that's who we want to help both make, the programs available and as high quality as possible. Next slide. So one of the ways we have lots of staff to help you, but we also have these peer learning communities. We call them professional summer learning communities, PLCs, on lots of different topics. So if you have a specific interest or need help in areas of college access or arts programming or working with kids in public housing, or you're a school district or libraries or health and fitness, or go to the next slide. You can see some of the other ones, nature-based environment programs, special trauma-informed special populations with deep trauma that people run programs for, youth employment. We have practitioners, leaders with experience on those topics, running their own organizations day to day, who are facilitating groups to kind of show support. So you're welcome, it's free to join, and we hope you'll take advantage. Next slide. And we have a lot of great resources and opportunities for you to get plugged into, and events coming up, from a new website called discoversummer.org, which you'll hear a little bit more about, which will hopefully list programs and also be a way to share with parents resources that they can take advantage of. We're going to do a big media campaign across the country so people know it's not enough just to have programs and have them be good, but folks need to find them and get signed up. We consult to lots of groups all the time. And then all of you, we hope you will celebrate National Summer Learning Week And when you're in the middle of your program, July 11th through 15th, it's a chance to invite your local politicians, your local media, come see your programs in action and see why their investments in you and your organization and your programs matter so much. And then for those of you who can make it, we will have our annual national conference in Washington, D.C. At the Mayflower Hotel, October 24th, 26th. And again, I've told you about the learning community. So there's a lot that NSLA offers. Today is just the boot camp, but we hope this is part of a continuing relationship and partnership we have with you. Next slide. So we have a message now from our partner, Secretary Cardona, who cares so much about what you and we're all doing, and let's hear from him.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to join you here today. Summer learning programs have always been important for our students, but over the last couple of years, they've become essential. Quality, evidence-based summer learning and enrichment programs are key to recovering from the pandemic. These programs help accelerate students' academic learning. Equally as important, they support students' mental and physical health and their overall well-being through rich offerings and a focus on nurturing relationships. That's what this is all about, relationships. Summer programs also provide engaging and fun places for students to explore their passions and grow. These programs are crucial, too, for working parents and caregivers, giving them peace of mind knowing that their children are safe and that they're learning. At the Department of Education, we believe all children, especially those who have been most impacted by the pandemic, they deserve access to high-quality summer learning and enrichment. The ARP funds provide critical resources to help make that happen. Every state has the potential to leverage summer learning programs at the local level, to strengthen school community partnerships, and provide young people with the support they need, even when school is out. We must seize this moment to do all we can for our children. We must reimagine what summer learning programs can be for our communities. No resource can go untapped. Community organizations that run summer programs have the experience, they have the expertise and the devoted staff to help our students learn and grow. Building and expanding partnerships among states, districts, and community-based partners is a vital component of helping our students recover from the pandemic. It's going to require intentional collaboration. The work starts now to get every young person signed up for a high-quality program. Every child across the country should have access to quality summer learning programming. We need to make it easy for families and students to find great programs. So I'm grateful to the NSLA and its partners for providing discoversummer.org as a great resource for families to navigate their options. Thank you for working directly with families and communities to get kids enrolled. I look forward to celebrating National Summer Learning Week this upcoming July 11 through 15. And I'd like to invite leaders across the whole country to visit programs in their communities. Let's show support for those programs. Thank you for inviting me to take part in this kickoff, and I'm really looking forward to this summer.
Thank you to Secretary Cardona and to the U.S. Department of Education. We're so honored they are such huge leaders and partners with us in this work. This summer learning has moved, we should just be transparent about it, from a niche issue that some of us cared about day in, day out to a national response strategy and priority of America to help all kids recover from this pandemic. So we're going to get into that conversation. This conversation today, this panel, is sponsored by our friends at Scholastic who make our work possible. So I wanted to turn it over to Dorothy Weintraub to just say a few words before we get to the panel. Dorothy?
Hello. It's so great to be here with all of you. Thanks, Aaron. Scholastic is a long-time proud partner of NSLA, and we have been an investor in summer learning with Kidlit and so many groups in the network. You know, here we at Scholastic know summertime can provide tremendous opportunities for kids to accelerate reading, to experience the social and emotional impact of good literature and stories, and to make up for any lost learning as access to instruction and reading has had to be completely rethought due to the pandemic. Research, as we know, has proven that in a typical year, summer reading supports skill gains and its absence leads to widening skill gaps. With this in mind, our Scholastic Reading Promise is to help you get books in the hands of kids, support social emotional well-being, build skills, and create community among kids. We also know it's just as important to involve our families and community folks to ensure children are supported during these months. I'm going to put in the chat below some of our proven summer reading resources for children, families, and volunteers so that we can all work together to support reading acceleration and build confidence that reading success brings. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to meet all of you, and I look forward to this presentation. Back to you, Aaron.
Thank you so much, Dorothy, and Scholastic, and Dwayne, and everything you've been doing for generations of children. We now want to turn over to Christina Russell, who's going to be our moderator. And I've known her. She's an amazing leader and researcher in our field of out-of-school time. And she's also the leader of our Evidence and Practice Summer Learning Community. She's going to be moderating this panel, and I'll let her introduce the other panelists. Christina.
Thank you, Erin, and thank you to all for being here for today and really investing this time in thinking about how to plan for summer learning. I know you're all invested in this work and in joining this session in really thinking about the research and what we know about student needs, about good practice, and about how to really make those connections in your summer learning programs. And so I am so excited to be here today to work with my co-panelists who are all experts and bring really interesting perspectives. I'll introduce them in a second, but really wanted to just start off by framing this. We know that we've all heard a lot in the the news and the research where some of the needs are. We hear a lot about the learning losses. We know there's a real mental health challenge facing our young people today. We hear a lot about wellness. We also know that there's some, interesting strategies underway. At the same time, we don't want to just dwell in those data and in understanding those losses and those needs, but really thinking proactively about what can be done, how to really help support young people and their families. And I think that's really the tenor of this conversation today, where all of you who are, planning and designing and really working, busily right now to think about what your summer is going to look like and what you're going to offer. We want to really help to make the research come alive and be applied to that work that you're doing in your programs. And so we're not doing a research presentation today. We're really going to have a conversation that draws on the expertise of the panel and really helps to make those connections between, what challenges are we seeing right now in the field? What is the research saying? And what are those implications for programs as you move ahead in your design and planning, and really walk away with hopefully some practical ideas that you can bring back to your programs about those practices and strategies. So with that framing, I'm going to introduce, because I think their bios are in the chat, but so excited to have my panelists, co-panelists here today. Emma Dorn with McKinsey & Company, Cecilia Young from Attendance Works, Megan Kufield from NWEA, and Deirdre Hawks from the American School Counselor Association. And just so excited to bring the variety of perspectives to this conversation, and to really hear about what they've all been learning, what they've been observing in the field, in their work, in their research this year, and how that can apply to your summer programs. So, I think we're going to just launch into the conversation and open the floor to hear from each of you about what you are learning and observing in students this school year. What are you hearing about, whether it's attendance, about learning loss, about social emotional well-being and mental health of young people? What's happening? What's your research showing?
Oh, I'm happy to kick it off a little bit in terms of what we're learning and what we're seeing. I think, one of the things we've seen is that the pandemic has impacted different children in very different ways. And so I'm going to present some data, and others are too, but remember, a lot of this data is averages, and each child is unique. And the pandemic may have impacted some children much in very different ways than others. And so, you know, for example, as we've looked at assessment data across the US, we see that on average, students are about 4 months behind in mathematics and about 3 months behind in reading, where they would have been otherwise. And so this summer is a great opportunity to support students in accelerating some of those gaps, but understanding that different students are going to be in really different places. And so what we found is that students in majority Black schools were actually more like 5 months behind, and students in majority white schools maybe as little as 2 months behind, given some of the different access to both internet, devices, live instruction, and the opportunities afforded to students in different circumstances. I think similarly at the classroom level, you're really seeing increasing differences between students, even within a classroom. And some of the research suggests that, you know, in a typical classroom, there may be an additional 3 students who are 2 or more grade levels behind. And so really understanding how your programs can meet each student where they are and really understanding each student. And that's just on the academic side. I'll come back in a little bit on the mental health and attendance side. Want to give others a bit of a chance to jump in before I talked for too long. But I think similarly, you know, treating each student as an individual on those sides as well.
Emma, that is so true. I hear from our colleagues all across the country about how they're trying to meet the varying needs of students. You think about the learning strategies that students have lost and there's, you know, a need to fill the gap for. You think about the self-management skills that need to be taught and retaught and reinforced, but ultimately those critical social skills that students need across the lifespan, so important and could easily be a barrier for students to be able to enhance and have those positive academic outcomes, their level of comfort in asking teachers questions, their level of comfort in just making friends and keeping friends. I think being in tune to what your student needs are and being able to apply whatever resources are around you. That's why we really appreciate the stakeholders in our summer camps, simply because our students need an opportunity outside of the classroom to enhance their learning. They need those hands-on opportunities just to be able to practice those social skills and to really learn how to continue climbing the ladder. Yes, we know that there are deficits all around, but the one thing that we have learned with our students returning to school, there's still a desire for them, from them to do well. They want to excel, they want to exceed, they have goals in life. They want their lives to have meaning and purpose. And that's where we all are right now, trying to help feel what those needs are so that they can get to the places where they want to be.
Yeah, I completely agree with what has been said so far. And I think one thing that I really, I'm glad that Emma made the point about unique children with different needs, because I think we've focused a lot on learning loss as kind of this universal thing, when we know it is really heterogeneity is really what we're seeing in terms of different impacts. And the one additional kind of point I wanted to make around who we're seeing as being more affected is we certainly see in school districts that have a high percentage of high poverty schools, and a lot of students in need were really impacted. And so as we think about how we're going to help build out of this and get back the learning that had been lost, I think we're just thinking about the resources and who is in most need of these summer programs. I think students that were the low-income students, the high poverty schools, really we need to be focusing as much resources as possible into helping some of those children, because we saw really large impacts in continuing through the school year of 2020, 2021. So it wasn't just that initial shock of the school closures. We know many school districts struggled to return to in-person learning and have continued to have struggles in terms of getting kids into classroom, making sure there are enough teachers showing up, making sure there are enough bus drivers to get kids to school. So I think this really highlights the need for summer, because when we see things like 3 to 5 months of learning behind, that's not something we can just put on teachers and say, take care of this. This has to be done
both in school time as well as during out of school time. And I think summer is a really great opportunity for that.
And I'd like to piggyback and add to the opportunity we have. We knew that attendance was affecting 8 million children before the pandemic. And I think Emma's going to share some about what's happened to further exacerbate that issue during COVID and during school closures. But the exciting thing that we know is we can use that attendance data to figure out which kids would most benefit and most need these summer learning programs that you're working on. So that's a preview, and I really want to have us be forward-looking about how we can actually use data to be supportive.
Yeah, and I can share a little bit of that data. I think one of the things that's really interesting is on the learning front and on the mental health front, we have seen some improvements from the spring to the fall. And so from the spring of last year, 2021, to the fall of 2021, parent perceptions of both the amount of unfinished learning, student mental health concerns, it improved a little. It's still much worse than before the pandemic, but we were beginning to see some signs of hope. Sadly, when we look at the attendance data, it keeps getting worse. And I can share a little bit of that here. If you look, and this is based on a parent survey that we did 2 parent surveys, one in the spring of 2021, one in the fall of 2021, of about 15,000 parents across the United States. You could see that parents pre-pandemic, about 8% of parents reported that their child was chronically absent. And parents tend to underestimate the proportion of children. They tend to underestimate this. So just bear that in mind as you look at these numbers. These are probably an underestimate. By the spring, about 18% were reporting that their students had been chronically absent, having missed like 15 or more school days in the 2020 to 2021 school year. When we asked in the fall, the school year had just begun. And so we kind of scaled that data and said, has your child missed 4 or more school days where school was offered thus far, which would kind of map up to 15, and you could see the number increased again. And so it's almost tripled. And it continued to get worse in the fall. And what was really concerning is that it continued to get worse. And this kind of brings back what Megan was saying about students from low-income communities continue to get worse for those students. And actually, we then cut it even more granularly, and you can see that the high-income students from high-income families, actually it's beginning to recover. But students from lower-income families, attendance continuing to worsen. And so again, it's thinking about who to reach out to for summer learning programs, really thinking about those degrees of where can you focus, where can you reach out to students who maybe haven't had the opportunity to be engaged in school this year as would be ideal.
And Christina, if I might just say an explanatory note, I don't want to do any insider speak. So chronic absence is that measure, missing a little over 2 days a month, that's associated with not reading at grade level. That's associated with poor academic performance in middle school. And it's associated with dropout. So that's why it's so important that you know with that data which students really most need your support from summer learning programs.
So I think that's a really important point to think about, where those implications are for summer programs as you're in this phase of really planning and designing and starting that outreach in terms of how to target and who to target. And maybe looking at those students who are falling behind in school in terms of attendance and becoming chronically absent, because that does, as Cecilia just pointed out, lead to more of the learning challenges and the academic performances. That also, I know, can be one of the harder groups of students to reach, those who are disengaged in school, how to then engage them in these summer learning programs. And so I'm curious, as you all think about that and reflect about that, and even what you're hearing and seeing from families and parents about engagement also, how do you think about those implications of that absenteeism and those engagement questions about about the opportunities and the challenges in terms of reaching students who might benefit most from the summer programs?
Wow, what a wonderful question. I think that for those who sponsor summer programs, they have to consider all options to be on the table to reduce barriers that keep students from participating. You think about absences at school and the reasons behind the absences. You may have students who are working now to help support families, and summer programs might not be an option, or for the students who already had issues with being able to participate in school programs because of the lack of transportation. If mom or dad might be working, you're going to have the same issue for summer programs. So those who are out there and have these wonderful enrichment opportunities, consider what the needs are of students in the community. Communicate with school counselors to find out what are the challenges right now, get ahead of the game, plan early, just to be able to offer, be able to target specific students so that they know what's out there for them. Sometimes, and I get it, our students might need a little push, a little help with getting the information they need. You might have to actually lay it in their hands, but they need to get it, but not just the name of a program, but who the program is for, and being able to personalize an offer or an opportunity. It makes all the difference in the world. Let the student know how that opportunity could really be a significant connection for them to build whatever skills they need for an expressed career interest, to help them even understand math in school a bit more. So I say all cards on the table and all options are open. Put that creativity out there, just to be able to connect to students and reduce barriers.
I love that, Deirdre. It's so important to have that trusted messenger reach out to you. So when you think about the student groups you're concerned about, communicating in the home language, communicating in from counselors, from teachers, from folks that the families know and trust, and really framing it as an exciting opportunity to learn, as opposed to, you are in trouble and you're going to summer school so we can kill and drill, right? No, that's not what this is. This is where you really want to be.
Exactly.
Those are the opportunities, and not having, I think ARP is so exciting because it's funding that allows everyone to participate, as opposed to, the usual people who respond, people like me, sign their kids up and take up all the slots. You don't want that. You want the kids who really would benefit signing up as well as everyone else.
And I think one of the things that we've noticed, even though there's huge amounts of funding now for summer programs, some of that funding isn't necessarily going to the folks who need it most. And I can share a little bit more data on that. Give me a little bit. I'm the data geek and I love to share slides. So thanks for bearing with me on that. So this was some analysis we did a couple of months ago, actually. And so it's a little out of date, but I think it's still directionally correct from everything I've read, which is, if you look at the way that the ESSA 3 funding has been committed, and this was analysis by Burbio, where they have been basically scraping as soon as anybody releases how they're spending their money, they pull it into this database. So this is obviously a small amount of the total ESSA 3 funding, but this is the amount that's already been committed. And about, just over a quarter going to academic recovery. And of that, the biggest category is summer learning. And so a big opportunity to expand programs, as Cecilia said, make them available to everyone, make them really engaging and exciting. I think what worried me is that when I looked at, we asked parents in the fall, has your child participated in a program to support them in academic recovery since the spring of 2021? And about a fifth of parents had participated in tutoring, 19% in after school, about 15% in summer school. What was worrying is that across each of these programs, there was a huge gap between the number of low-income students who had participated and the number of high-income students. And if you remember Megan's data, it's the low-income students who potentially have fallen furthest behind during COVID. And yet those are the very students who are somewhere between kind of 10 and 15 percentage points less likely to actually be accessing these great programs that can help them recover. And so we also ask parents kind of going forward, do you want to access programs for your students? And again, just interesting in what parents were interested in. And so academic summer school at drill and kill, right at the bottom of the list. People weren't interested in that. And so being able to communicate to parents and students that what you're offering is not a drill and kill, but is actually an enriching experience that's going to have a really transformational impact on their ability to succeed academically the following year, but also it's going to be fun. It's like the old broccoli and ice cream. We're going to give you some broccoli, but we're going to give you a ton of ice cream. We're going to do some really fun stuff as well. The other thing I found interesting, one is that in-person was consistently, and this was back in November 2021, right before the Omicron surge, but still a lot of concerns about COVID. There was still more interested in-person versus virtual programs from parents. And there was still this gap between low-income and high-income parents who are interested. And so this is a little harder to read, but when these are positive numbers, it means that more high-income parents were interested. And overall, about 13 percentage points of low-income parents more were not interested in any programs. Like, so 25% overall of parents said, I don't want any programs, but there were actually 38% of low-income parents who said, I'm not really interested in any programs. And perhaps, it's because of some of those barriers that Deirdre mentioned, like they can't get their kids to the programs. Historically, the programs have kind of stigmatized and targeted their children. And so how to get over some of those barriers to make sure that the programs are getting to the people that really need it.
Yeah, thank you all. I think that's such important insight about really how to think about reaching those students and families who need the supports, how to be creative in those outreach and really go to communities and make sure that people know about the access, know about what's being offered. And I think the slide that Emma just shared is also a good transition to thinking about it. Once you do that outreach, do that recruitment, and really bring young people into your programs, how to really think about that program design, that programs are in the risk of really thinking about their staffing, thinking about their activities, their programming, their curriculum. What are we seeing in these data and the implication of those data about the kinds of programs and strategies that really can match these needs, both the interests of families, and to what you're saying, is it an academic program? Is it a program that's more of the ice cream, less of the broccoli? What's that mix? And how to really think about, bringing those programs that are going to be meaningful, going to be engaging and impactful for families.
Oh, I love your questions today. I think it goes back to what Emma said earlier. Depends on what the students' needs are. It really does. You may be in an area where it's crucial for students to understand how to balance their time. They need to understand how to add tools for learning strategies to their toolkit. They might not understand what it means to create a schedule and stick to it. They might not understand what it means to set a goal. They might not understand what it means to be able to cope positively with challenges, or anything that they may be facing. So, there may be programs out there that specifically focus on skill building and whether it's social communication skills or learning strategies. And so I think, there's so many opportunities to meet student needs out there.
And I think there's also some creative ways that you can combine elements of these. So, we saw that nearly 30% of parents were really interested in tutoring, homework help, or test prep. Now, there are ways that some summer programs have integrated that into their summer program, so that there are opportunities in part of a full summer day of 9 to 3 p.m. of having a 45-minute 1 to 3 little tutoring session. And so you don't have to have 8 hours of drill and kill in math, because you get really quality 45 minutes a day of tutoring in math, and then you can spend some of that other time doing some of those enrichment activities, some of that teamwork, collaboration, other things that make the summer fun.
Absolutely. And I would add, I had shared this with you, Christina, separately. Summer programming was tremendously successful in my home state of California last summer. And one of the strategies that I thought was marvelous was around staffing, right? And I know people are concerned about having enough staff this coming summer. Mm-hmm. So two of the strategies around staffing, one was to let teachers teach what they were passionate about, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to follow the pacing guide all summer. They did that during the year. It's so much more exciting when it's something they're passionate about teaching. And then Deirdre talked about older students and how many of them feel they have to work to provide income. Well, one of the strategies in the California programs was hiring older youth to serve in summer programs for younger students. So it gives them income, it gives them work experience, and it gives them that all those things that Deirdre talked about, those skills of being on time, being responsible, and getting ready for being a working adult. So those are great strategies that I would love to hear folks out there are actually implementing, and maybe even more.
So those are some of the, strategies that we saw last summer that I think there's definitely a lot to learn from. And, certainly I think one of the great things about summer is that it can be a little bit different from the school year curriculum and school year programming and the pacing guides, and introduce some more of that flexibility to really support young people in new and different ways. At the same time, I'm wondering if there are strategies, practices that you're all observing happening during this school year to address some of the needs, some of the challenges facing young people that you think, that are emerging as effective, that the summer programs might be able to learn from and think about adapting or bringing in some strategies or practices to their programs that are, evidence-based, that are showing, that they're being well received, that they seem to be working to help with engagement, with learning, with social emotional needs. Are there any recommendations of what we're seeing that's effective in this year of recovery that could translate over to the coming summer?
Go ahead.
Just hearing from our colleagues in the field, there's an increased level of collaboration between school counselors, social workers, school nurses, school psychologists, other support personnel to really apply and connect students to resources. That seems to be a really positive and effective strategy for providing wraparound support for whatever students' needs are. Counselors are continuing to facilitate small groups as they can to targeted groups of students who are not experiencing positive academic outcomes, or they may be missing more school than what is deemed normal. Or they may have more discipline referrals for certain things, these indicators of other things that may be happening in their lives. So anytime that they can extend that learning beyond the small groups or just the typical intervention plan at school. And I think this is where the connect with our stakeholders in the summer planning areas so critical. They can continue that learning even outside of school.
Yeah. I want to ask a follow-up question for that, Deirdre, put you on the spot for a second. As you talk about partnership and you talk about the important role that counselors can play in supporting young people, do you have any strategies, recommendations for summer programs that really seek to build those kind of partnerships and to engage with the counselors at schools? I know that can be a tricky piece sometimes for providers, especially if they're from nonprofits or outside of the school day. How to make those connections to really understand where students are.
Well, just as popular as college fairs can be, summer planning fairs can be just as positive. You bring in those stakeholders so that they can interact with students, give them information, give students opportunity to ask questions, help them in the process of being able to apply, making sure that, there's some follow-up support, because just as there may be challenges in initial communication and learning about the opportunities, there's yet, the possibility of challenges with getting whatever application paperwork, what have you, in to secure the opportunity. So from an event where, several folks can be there in the school building, as a school or district would allow, is critical. You have it right there in the school day. So it really minimizes the barriers for students, but also having access even after, and being able to make connections to secure spots. We've seen success just in being intentional about sharing the information with students in that way.
Emma, did you want to?
Sure, I can chip in. I was just thinking to your question of what are the kind of big learnings from this year. I think one of the big learnings is one of the big challenges, and I'm just seeing a lot of comments in the chat about the challenge of human capital. It's like, we can't hire bus drivers, we can't hire substitutes. I know summer programs are also having trouble. And so just wanted to share a little bit of what we've been hearing from some places around expanding the pool of folks that you can consider. And we talked about hiring youth. I thought, Cecilia, that was one great strategy. I think across the board, we've seen that there is an ability for near peers. So young people with lived experience who students can relate to be really powerful. And that might be high school students, it might be college students. We've seen in a bunch of districts partnerships with local HBCUs, for example, really powerful in actually providing kind of a picture of, oh, this is where I could go. And then also just expanding the pool of people available for programs, and also potentially expanding the pool of potential teachers and future school counselors as well. And so, Breakthrough Collaborative is a model that's been running for many years over the summer that tries to kind of do both of those things. Really exciting model. We've also seen during the school year, districts actually think more creatively about creating smaller groups through having folks who aren't teachers lead some portion of academics. And so one school district that's really interesting, Edgecombe School District, actually after the pandemic thought, wow, these learning pods have actually been really successful in some ways. And so they still do the literacy and numeracy with the certified teachers in the morning, but in the afternoon, they do a bunch of their social science and science instruction, actually using local community members in smaller groups of 8 to 12 people, 8 to 12 students, which both, again, creates more diversity of adults in the building, and just a more exciting experience for students. And so kind of thinking outside the box of who you might be potentially trying to hire. The other folks that we've seen coming back, a lot of retired teachers. So we don't want to ask too much of retired teachers. We've seen a lot of districts reaching back out to retired teachers as well at this time.
I would add that part of the reason we may be having some hiring issues is what we're paying, and whether it's a full-time job, and is it something that you can do year-round. So there are creative ways that you can be thinking about how you structure those jobs. So it's not just a minimum wage job part-time for the summer. You can be thinking about ways to bundle it, so it's actually an attractive option for people who want to work. So those are things to think about, and this is probably the most money we're ever going to see in our lifetimes, or at least mine. I'm older than some of you, and we might as well make use of it in creative ways.
I'm thinking too, as a research panel, it'd be remiss to not think about measurement, right? We talked about applying some of this evidence, but also what's the measurement of success? And I know this is a question that many summer programs face as they're asked to tell their funders, to tell their districts, to tell their partners about their impact, about their success in delivering these programs. From your perspectives, what's some advice you would give about how programs could be thinking about how they measure their success this summer, how they're going to communicate that coming this fall as they look ahead to future summers as well? Because it is, as you said, Cecilia, it's, there's a huge opportunity. There's a lot of funding right now. How can that be scaled and sustained by showing where the value has been and making that investment?
Well, I'll start with the world's easiest measure, which is how are kids' attendance patterns in your summer program, right? That's the first easy measure of success. They're voting with their feet. They love your program. They can't wait to get there. They're there every day. That already is your first measure. I'll leave the harder measures for Megan and Emma.
Yeah, I would totally add, I think attendance is the most important thing. And that really tells us if, that gives us a lot of information on any other measures that we may have. If, if there's a real academic slant to the program, you can of course do, achievement test score measures at the beginning and end. I do think that those can often undersell the value of a program because many summer programs are trying to do many things at once beyond just academics. So I do think, depending on the goal of the program, making sure there's some other measures about enjoyment or engagement, or also some of these kind of social, emotional, mental health skills, because I think those are often where we're going to see a bigger impact, unless the program is more of a summer school that is really oriented towards, specific math and reading skills. But yeah, I do think, depending on the funder and depending on the type of value that is needing to be demonstrated, I think we, a broad set of measures are always best, but understanding what's going on in the program and attendance, I think is probably some of the key things about whether the program is working as intended.
I think attendance is so important. I think you could also look at achievement as well as discipline data. If you've got students who perhaps they were struggling academically prior to their participation in a summer program, and taking a look at how they're performing in their classes the semester or year after versus before, to determine, is there a difference here? I think you could also take a look at how students believe they are doing. You could maybe the before and after effect, what is their sense of positivity, how much of a positive attitude do they have about school? Do they have some type of Likert scale, what have you, for not only their attitude, but their level of self-confidence? Can they identify ways or how to cope, depending on what kind of camp that they've participated in, and sometimes you look at the results of those things and see how they correlate to how their outcomes look at school. And boy, you truly have something to talk about.
Yeah, I think that partnerships theme comes back again and again, not to see the summer as kind of this isolated module floating in space, but it's part of a continuum and a journey for the student. So being able to measure what happens the year after may be just as meaningful as what happens actually, by the end of the program. Is how did their attendance and discipline and progression change as they went back into school? And I think especially last summer, we saw some really positive effects as it was tough for some students to come back from virtual and work out how to make friends, how to communicate with other humans. And so some of those things, I know for my own kids, I have 3 kids. I have a now 15-year-old, 12-year-old, and 9-year-old. And it was difficult to just the social, emotional, how to start a conversation, right? Because they hadn't had to do that for a year. And And so being able to think not only of what happened during the summer, but how that facilitated the rest of the year of learning.
Yeah, those are all great ideas. Cecilia, sorry, do you want to?
Oh, I had one last one. It's I'm Captain Obvious on your webinar. I think it's who shows up in the fall on that first day of school. We know from the data that there are lots of students on the bubble and probably are thinking of ending their formal schooling. So if they come back because they've had a good summer experience, that's a win.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for adding that. And I think that's also points to kind of really practical measures that programs, can probably access and understand and really see more directly their impact. And many of what you've all been talking about are things that summer programs, can use. They know their attendance, they can see that engagement, they can capture that, they can track that. And I think, as this panel of researchers, one of the things that I know in my own work, I always struggle with thinking about, okay, well, how to communicate, what are the right questions to ask at a really local level to know day to day that immediate sense of success, and what does that look like versus what are the bigger questions for the field and for growing our knowledge more generally, to be able to take that research and apply it and share the kinds of strategies we've been sharing today. And so I'm curious, we've talked about sort of, that local measure of success around attendance and around engagements and attitudes that I think are so important and can be really informative in program design. I'm curious too, as we, get to the end of this session, for you to think bigger about the field and to think about, in this summer 2022 that's coming up, what are the really burning questions for the field of summer learning? What would you like to see explored, that can really help to continue to deepen and strengthen the field moving forward?
I have one a little bit out of left field, which is I've been doing a lot of work recently on actually the voice of youth themselves and the role of youth actually co-developing and having a real voice in their own education design and pathway. And I think summer learning is a place that you could really do this maybe more easily than in the traditional school year, where there's a lot more regulatory constraints and a lot more difficulties. And I think that I would love to see, as we talk about measurement, actually having and adjusting programs, having youth have a say in that process. And so part of the measure is, did you think it was a worthwhile experience for themselves? How would they change that next year? And not just a survey that happens at the end, but an actual ability for them to co-design before, during, and after the programs that they're engaged in, especially at the high school level. So I would love to think more about how we get youth more engaged in designing programs and really owning them for themselves.
I would love if you had some sort of cohort study where you could track kids who did well in summer programs and see the effects longer term. Friends, we are in boom times. We have wonderful resources and we're thankful for them. But we know the cycle will change and that the funding may go away. And when that funding drops, you want to be able to justify that your program makes a real difference for students and know what about them makes a difference. And that's the evaluation question that long-term we all need to answer.
I would certainly, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. Go ahead.
I would love to see if we could gather kind of promising practices across programs and districts and do more of a really understanding how programs were successful at getting students to engage and show up, and then as well as how they were successful in getting staff hired and strategies like that that could be shared out. I know many school districts are trying to run summer programs and are struggling with many of the same different issues around attendance and around staffing. And so I think that the more we can do to kind of find promising practices and share and understand what works in different contexts will be really valuable for planning programs in the future. Because I know that there are some unique kind of parts of this COVID situation in terms of staff burnout and things like that, but this is kind of a chronic issue in terms of finding staffing for these kind of optional programs in the summer. So that is something I think could be really valuable.
I also believe in consistency and stability for our children in this day and age, having had to endure the pandemic and being a witness and even experiencing the trauma that they have experienced, getting them back to a place where they feel safe, feel comfortable, feel like there's a light somewhere or a sense of hope. It would be really wonderful if there is a summer program that offers some type of opportunity to interact even after the summer experience is over, something midway through the year. It doesn't have to be extensive, but keeps the student engaged and connected, especially if it was a positive experience, could give them an opportunity to revisit, regroup, continue to build and grow. This is something that students could very well use to continue to climb that ladder to where they want to be. So having something in addition to would be really great to see.
Well, this has been so insightful, and I feel like there's so much to learn from what's already known and where we're seeing the field and seeing the needs of young people, thinking about what to do and what to really apply in this coming summer, and then really looking ahead. As we wrap up this session, I just want to put out to any of my, 4 expert colleagues here on this call with me, if you had one recommendation for the programs who are listening today as they think about summer coming in just a few short months, what do you have any advice, recommendation as you think ahead?
Be flexible. Just be flexible.
I think just treat every kid as an individual, unique human and really try and understand what each child needs.
Emma took mine. So
I'll double down on that one.
I think that, really being enriching and engaging, even programs that are supposed to be academically oriented, I think the more we can do to be engaging and go beyond just kind of something that feels school-like and make it into a positive, fun atmosphere. I think that's really great.
Make them want to come.
Well, yes, thank you all so much. I also want to thank everybody who was listening today. There's been a really active chat and lots of great ideas shared in there as well. So I think that idea of, really sharing strategies with each other, and I think you'll continue to do that throughout this summer boot camp. I also wanted to, plug in this last few minutes that if you enjoyed this conversation and like thinking about this application of research to practice, Erin had mentioned at the top of this call that there is a research evidence and practice PLC. It's available free of charge from NSLA, and we're actually about to launch soon. I'll be having the joy of leading that session, and the plan is to really make that applied as well as you think about planning for this coming summer. We'll have kind of a virtual monthly session probably at the end each of April, May, and June to really help think about how do you take this evidence, how do you apply it, how do you track information this summer, and then come together at the NSLA conference in the fall to really reflect on what was learned over this summer, which is going to be another really important learning experience for the field and continue to grow. And there'll be a lot of, it's a professional learning community, lots of opportunities for peer sharing, as well as continuing to hear from experts, but sort of a hands-on opportunity to grapple with some of these issues. So if you're interested, I'm putting in the chat the landing page. There's information on how to access that, and hope to see and meet many more of you there. And I think with that, I get to turn it back over to Erin.
Yes, thank you, Christina, and thank you, Megan and Emma and Cecilia and Deirdre. That was so fascinating and so helpful for all of us as we kind of get grounded in what we're responding to and what is the context in which we're trying to create and grow all these great programs. I'd like to just make one quick point before we transition to the next couple, in our next session, the next panelist. First of all, we have some great resources here that Leslie's put up and you'll have access to, but including a new full version report that NSLA is just coming out with today with Harvard University McLean Hospital and Professor Gil Noah on building resilience in youth through summer experiences. That's on the top left here, and we could put that report in the chat. But that was a survey of 2,000 parents, both who were in structured and unstructured programs, and kind of what their feedback was and what they liked and what worked and what didn't work from their perspective. And I think could also be helpful as we are planning our programs. And the other point I'd like to just make and bring up, which maybe is obvious, but because so much funding, federal funding is flowing to the states and now to school districts, we talk a lot about school-based programs, but there's a real distinction between school-based programs that happen in the school building and school-aligned summer programs, which I think is also a huge number of our audience, which are people working in concert with the school district to meet their goals, or are running programs at aquariums and inside parks and inside libraries and public housing authorities. And they want to get the academic goals the school district has, but they also want to do lots of other things, and they want to do it in different places. And it's summer and you want kids to be outside and you want them to have different new experiences that feel a little different from the typical school day. So I just bring that up because I know that's a big part of our audience, and a lot of teachers are working in these programs in other settings. So just something to keep in mind, that not every program has to be run inside the school building. And I think we see that in lots of model award-winning programs, especially, and lots of great examples. Boston After School and Beyond being a great example, where their city has a classroom model. You see this all across their city and now even their state. So those are just a couple of quick things. These are other resources here that you could see. And we have a great panel we're going to transition to next, which is sponsored by our friends at National After School Association, who are just coming off an amazing national conference in Las Vegas last week. Maybe some of you were there. And they are the real leaders and representatives of the workforce of the out-of-school time field. And Deirdre mentioned, oh, it would be nice if the summer programs would follow up in the school year, which of course we agree with. And when we talk about our field broadly, we call it a lot of times OST, out of school time. And it's a connection. We talk about summer and after school. So it's combined, it's connected. It's not working in silo and only one part of the year and one part of the day. And that a lot of these organizations are working in the summer, they're working during the school year, and it's year round. And that's what we're trying to get to here, is that summer and after school programs are just part of everyone's year-round planning and expectation of opportunities that young people are going to receive. But with that said, our next panel that we're going to go to is with great leaders who have expertise on an issue we heard coming up a lot in this last panel about student and staff recruitment and those challenges and everything in the context of COVID. And there's such demand and there were so many options for so many employees. They didn't just have to work in our programs, and how do we get them and retain them? And a lot of people do want to work in our programs for other things beyond money. We're going to hear about from great folks. You can see them right now. This panel is going to be moderated by our VP of Programs and Systems Quality, a partner and a friend and a leader, but on the NSLA team, Broderick Clark, who has decades of experience working with young people in programs and consulting and training and teaching everyone how to be youth-centric, but also just make great experiences kids want to come to. But everyone here has a lot of insight into that. So I'm going to turn it over first to our friends from NAA to say a few words. Angelica?
Yeah, hello everyone. So my name is Angelica Portillo, the Director of Advocacy and Workforce Initiatives at the National After School Association. Thank you for inviting me to say a few remarks. This is an important conversation because we know in our field we need a stable workforce to be able to deliver high quality programs that ultimately lead to positive youth outcomes. And I think my video is starting now. Great. And this is a really exciting time for NAA. We are developing a lot of more resources and engaging different stakeholders as we develop these after school workforce resources. And so one thing I want to share with you all today is the OST Leader's Guide to Equitable Hiring and Staff Development Practices. This guide is intended to catalyze the out-of-school time workforce, our stakeholders and partners to examine systems, elevate practices and policies that will build and strengthen the field. The guide includes 3 sections: recruitment and hiring, onboarding and professional development, performance reviews, and feedback. Each section provides best practices, guiding questions to support policy and practice. And there's also resources that are listed that are free to low cost around equitable hiring and staff development. These are good practices and policies leaders can implement that are starting to make equitable changes within their organizations. When I was working at a local intermediary and we were starting on our equity work, we needed this type of guide. We were ready to take action and do the work, but we needed a little help, especially when it had to be tailored to our field. So it's a really great resource. I'll plug the link in the chat. And at NAA, we realized that there is a broader need for a comprehensive overhaul of job quality in our sector, from rethinking compensation to making benefits more accessible and creating career pathways. We can do better, and we know we absolutely need to meet the current and future staffing needs of our field. And this guide is just the beginning, so I can't wait for you all to review it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Angelica, and thank you to the NAA, a huge partner and sister organization to NSLA. So we're all in this together. We're all part of this big ecosystem of folks who care about education and youth development and helping young people holistically all times of day and all times of year. So thank you for that great resource. I'm now going to turn it over to Broderick, who's going to tee up our next panel and introduce our panelists. Broderick.
Absolutely, absolutely. I say quality, you say matters. Quality matters, quality matters. Without question, I'm super happy to be here on this call with 300 of my close friends around the country that's dedicated to providing these vibrant places and spaces for young people to survive and thrive. We know that young people will thrive when they feel safe and they're supported and put in situations to learn and lead. So shout out to the forum and the YCAT for that great language to describe who we are and what we do. I'm inspired by the previous conversation. Shout out to the neutral zone. So if folks are looking for great programming where young people are actually leading those programs and the facilitators are guides by the side, check out our friends at the neutral zone. I'm joined here today to have a really great conversation, without a doubt. And it's really about recruitment, retention, the relationships that we build along the way that are hopefully transformative and not transactional, and how do we support our staff and our youth. It seems like everybody's talking about the workforce crisis and the great sort of resignation that we're all experiencing over these past 24 months. But how can we turn that on its head and make this great resignation be a great opportunity for finding folks that might have an interest, the wherewithal, the passion to be present for young people and to get those young people access to those key developmental experiences that we know that they need to survive and thrive. How do we make sure that we find folks that are cool, are interesting, that the young people can relate to, that where the opportunities are flexible, so that they can continue to do what they need to do for their families. We know that we need to think both creatively and strategically. And so I'll encourage us to even think about what does that look like, feel like, and sound like for us to think creatively and strategically to find and retain excellent staff. We know that if we want to run a quality, robust experience, we're certainly going to involve young people in co-creating what that experience is or what those experiences are. But we also know that part of that process is ensuring that we're attracting the right people and putting the right eyeballs in front of adult eyeballs in front of those young people. These individuals that have the knowledge, yeah, you can say knowledge real loud, knowledge, skills, competencies, and those competencies to serve young people at a really high level because that's what they deserve. But we know there's challenges with that right now. And I have a really strong group who I had the pleasure of connecting with prior to this call. So I'm excited about the conversation we'll have today. You see their names and titles here. I'll go ahead and just allow each member of the panel to just introduce yourself to this great group. Maybe a word or two about where you are, where you work, and then I have a few questions I'd like to throw out there for discussion. Also know that I'm going to be taking a look at that chat box. I see that's kind of robust as well. So if there's a question or a thought you'd like to share, we'd like to make this a conversation rather than a presentation. So I'll start with Katie. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and share with the world here who you are and a couple of quick words here of introduction.
Thank you, Broderick. So hello, everybody. Good to see you. I'm joining from Austin, Texas, where I am based. My name is Katie Wilsey, as Broderick said. I'm a consultant with the Learning Agenda. We're a small consulting firm that works in partnership with education agencies, philanthropy, youth serving organizations, and we're just in support of their missions for equitable access to high quality education and learning experiences for young people. So we try to help support them in their projects and help build their capacity. I work on a couple initiatives focused on summer learning that I might talk about in our conversation today. I had the opportunity to be a part of the development of the Wallace Foundation's Summer Learning Toolkit, which is a resource I think that is being shared, and we might want to point out some things in that today. And then I'm also working currently here in Texas with the education agency, so the statewide ed organization in Texas, on their Additional Days School Year initiative, which is working with districts and schools in leveraging summer to increase learning opportunities for students. And so we're in the second year of their planning and execution program, which is like a 4-year pilot that designs a strategic planning process and supports districts through that strategic planning process for designing their summer program. So there's over 40 education agencies involved in that. So I'm not sitting in a practitioner seat in this conversation, but I hope to be able to highlight and spotlight some of the work that's happening in Texas. So I'm excited to be part of the conversation. I have a little bit of a cold, so hopefully my voice comes through okay. So thanks, Broderick. Excited to be here.
You're coming through loud and clear.
Thanks.
I would have never known. So no worries there. How about we get person who's like really right there on the ground. Sergio, why don't you go ahead and grab the microphone and share with us. Who are you? What is Big Thought? Where are you right now?
Thank you everyone for joining us and joining here today. So my name is Sergio Antonio Garcia. I am the Senior Manager of Learning Systems. My pronouns are he, him, and él. So the work that I do here in Dallas, Texas, really is around this ecosystem building through our Dallas City of Learning initiative. And this ecosystem building of collaboration between institutions like the city, DISD, and in my frame of work and through my lens, the partner organizations who are doing the boots on the ground work, and how we can all share our strengths, share our resources, all in service to youth and community. And one of those things that we're really excited about doing and rolling out this summer is what we're calling creating creators, identifying the skill sets that are being built in the out of school time through culturally relevant programming, and identifying that learning pathway that is leading to opportunities, whether that's through entrepreneurship, through higher education, or whatever that youth might be looking for as part of their successful future. And so this creating the creator and learning pathways is how we're kind of framing that out in this skills building of 21st century learning and 21st century learners.
Thank you so much for being here with us today, Sergio. With Big Thought, we appreciate you very much. I know that we want to bring on great staff. We want to empower them with tools and give them what they need to be successful, and creating these pathways for young people to have access to those experiences. And so I'll throw it to my buddy Rod over here, who I know through InPlay just creates some amazing tools for that purpose. So glad to have you here today, Rod.
Thank you, Broderick. And it's an honor for me to be able to join my fellow panelists to tackle this very important issue. In a nutshell, I used to be the Chief Operating Officer for a high school youth entrepreneurship after school program. Did that for about 4 years. So I really saw how hard it was for our nonprofit to engage with multiple school districts across the country. And then a few years after that, I decided to co-found InPlay, where I'm the CEO. And what InPlay does is solves a fundamental problem of helping school districts to coordinate and connect their most underserved students with their summer programs and make sure that they get first dibs in signing up. And the struggle is particularly greater when a district is partnering with what Aaron called school line programs, your community-based partners. So we offer an activity guide, one that is sponsored by the National Summer Learning Association called discoversummer.org. I'm sure Aaron will talk about it later. But we also have a text-based registration service that takes the administrative work off the shoulders of both school staff as well as the provider's administrative staff. And it just makes their job easier so they can focus on all the good stuff that our prior panelists were talking about around program planning and training and delivery. So I'll stop there.
Fabulous. Thank you, Rod. Appreciate you being here on the call today. And you mentioned school districts. Great to turn it over to Andrew from Tuscaloosa. Please let us know who you are, what brings you to this conversation today, buddy.
Thank you so much, Broderick. Also an honor for me to be part of this panel. I'll say really thankful for the work that Katie and her team have done. If you're looking for adherence to the teachings of that toolkit, that's us. And as I mentioned to Sergio when we met earlier, we aspire to be like Big Thought, to have that in our community, and great admiration for the work Rod does as well. So I'm the director of strategic initiatives for my school district, Tuscaloosa City Schools. And about 5 years ago, the district basically made a public and very concrete commitment to making summer learning a core strategy for addressing achievement gaps. And for us, what that specifically means is we are going to do our entire part and do organizing work in the committee to, as we say, normalize summer learning. And we specifically mean at least 70 or 80% of our elementary kids need to be in a high quality program. So for us, scale is the thing that matters, in that if we believe in the quality, if we believe that it is essential for students to have this opportunity to learn, then we have to find a way to bring it to scale while maintaining quality. Just to give you an idea of how, and ESSER funding came up in the last session, and I know that's on our minds. Thanks to that, this year we are aiming to serve something on the order of 40% of our students K-12, pre-K-12, and then at the elementary level, it's a much higher percentage for many of our elementary schools. More like 50 or 60% of those schools are participating in the programs we are running, in addition to community programs that operate on our campuses and around the community. So we have a very, very deep commitment to this. We believe in it very deeply, and are really excited to be in this community of practice that are facing similar issues around the country. So it's really great to learn from others as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you all for being present live and direct on this call to share your expertise with the 300 folks that we have on the call at this moment around the country dedicated to this space. And so we're just going to have a conversation. I'll pose a few questions, and of course, anyone can chime in at any time if it strikes you and you feel compelled to. But I'd like to start with this idea of the youth development workforce being in crisis. And I know I've talked to a lot of folks, and folks always say, well, staffing is an issue, and I don't have enough staff, and we have a staffing shortage, and folks have even had to shut down for a little bit, and because of a lack of the staff student ratio not being able to be maintained because of shortages. First of all, is our workforce in crisis? And second, if it is, how are you experiencing that from your vantage point and your work? And there's also there's opportunity for folks to chime in the chat too. So I'm taking a look at that. So please go ahead, Sergio.
So I do agree that our workforce is in a bit of a crisis. And I'm seeing that through a lot of the conversations that I have with the partners who are doing programming on the ground. And I just had what's called a partner convening here, where I had over 40 plus organizations. And one of the big things that they talked about was, I don't have staff to do my summer program, or I don't have staff, period. And so there was a huge concern, and I had to sit and listen to that. And so how are we addressing that? I am privileged to say that part of the work that Big Thought does here in Dallas, Texas is a lot of people want to collaborate with us. So we've developed relationships and friendships to be able to try to meet those needs. And so we're trying to have conversations with universities through their educations, schools of education and their graduate students to make placement happen. But being mindful about that and saying, all right, let's go to the College of School and Music Education for our fine arts partners. Let's go to these engineering schools. So a lot of that conversation is what we heard in the previous panel, is making those connections. And so it's trying to bridge that gap and leveraging the relationships that an organization like Big Thought has within the city and within these institutions of higher education that are looking to place their student body into some of these learning opportunities, because we do also recognize that teaching in a classroom is going to be different than teaching in an out-of-school time organization or learning room, or whatever you might want to call it. And so it's being able to make that connection and try to mitigate that crisis of workforce when it comes to the work that the OST partner is needing to fill their labor shortage, so that they can have mindful connections not only to their youth, but to the communities, and making sure that they're providing a quality service at the end.
Thank you, Sergio. Anyone's going to chime in? Our workforce is really in crisis from your vantage point, and how is that playing out from your perspective, seat?
I'll chime in and say that twin or passion of mine is this issue more broadly in education, and I don't think it's possible to dispute that we're in big trouble with teacher shortage and educator shortages and these issues, and it seems, and again, this is a point that has been raised earlier. It's difficult. It's often difficult to retain school district staff for summer positions, and it's really not hard to understand why. When you're exhausted at the end of a year, it's hard to keep going for additional weeks or a month. So to me, the question, do we have a crisis? We absolutely do. And I think, and I saw a question in the chat, pay is relevant, and I think we have to address pay. But the answer to what else can we do is, seems to me that the larger issue in education in general is that we expect professional level work from teachers, and we deny teachers a lot of the rights and privileges that other professions afford their members. So how do you attract people? Find ways to treat them like professionals. One example of that is provide some flexibility. One of the strategies we use with our own folks is, let's say we have a 23-day program coming up, and I can't work in the program. I have to, I'm gonna have to be out, or this, that, or the other. And our attitude with them has been, listen, 15 days with you is better than 0 days with you. Let's get what we can get from you. I can't work a full day. Can you work half a day? And being willing to increase the complexity of the design of your program in order to create working conditions that work for individuals is one way. And to me, asking the questions, how can we make this a place that treats people like professionals, is key and is a way to attract talented folks to our programs.
If I can also add, one thing that also came to mind is really think about collaboration. And so how can we leverage one organization's workforce with another organization's workforce and expertises to create something really unique and relevant? And so I often encourage our arts partners within the Dallas City of Learning ecosystem to connect and collaborate with our college and career readiness organizations. And so when we can leverage each other's strengths and experiences, that's also in this idea of collaboration, how we can start to mitigate that labor loss. So when we're not all having to spread ourselves thin, so when we come together to build something bigger and greater, we're starting to leverage each other's strengths and assets.
Yeah, I would just piggyback on what Sergio said in terms of promoting greater collaboration. We operate in 65 school districts, and as Andrew said, right now, school staff, they're overworked, underpaid, and they are exhausted. They're just crawling to the end of the school year, hoping that they're not going to drop the ball anywhere. And so that's why we launched this service called Oscar, to take some of that administrative work off their shoulders of doing outreach, marketing, registration to the kids who are newcomers, homeless, foster youth, so that they don't have to do that. And I think when you are able to make the job more attractive by removing a lot of the administrative work, it's easier to sell to young people who may be more concerned about money. But, Broderick, if I may, I'd love to also just take a step back and think more strategically and think about the big picture. When thinking about why is there the Great Resignation, I actually went out to look and see what research was done and found this Pew Research study that named 3 key reasons why people cited as the main reasons why they left the job. One was definitely low pay. The other one was a desire to have more career advancement opportunities. And third was that they felt disrespected. And so there are opportunities, and I'm not saying this is what we're seeing in the summer or out of school time space, but it's an opportunity to change some of the power balance between employers and employees. And I'd actually even go so far as to assert that if you look at it even bigger, I think there's a power imbalance between the funders and the school districts that hold the money and those aligned program partners that Aaron was talking about, those that weren't given control over the funding through federal or state programs. I'm based out here in California, and the state just approved $4.6 billion last year in order to address learning recovery. But it's also all held by the school districts. And I see tired and weary school staff, but I also see tired and weary community partners. And I think that if there was greater collaboration, like what Sergio was talking about, where we actually could afford to pay them a little better, maybe not as much as Target or close to it, I saw that in the chat, then we would win hands down over Target because we're giving people meaningful work, the opportunity to use their talents, their creativity, to design really fun programs and see the light go on in kids' eyes when you have them engaged. So just, really respecting the gifts and talents that our staff can bring, I think will create a stronger, more attractive career path to recruiting workers.
Thank you, Rod. Appreciate that zoomed out perspective as well as we try to tackle this issue of making sure that we have highly qualified staff that are ready to rock and roll and to leverage their superpower of establishing strong relationships with families. And so moving from the conversation about how do we get them in the door with, with respect to salaries and all of that, when we do and are able to have a staff present, we know that the relationship that they establish with the families is really core to that experience and makes summer learning a really, really special time for many young people. Could you talk a little bit about how you've seen or witnessed staff sort of showing up with respect to establishing that strong relationship? What does that look like and feel like and sound like from your perspective?
Hate to be hogging the conversation here, but I think because some of the work that we do here at Big Thought, which is about creating a space of acceptance and creating a space where you're able to be as open as you want. As I identify for myself, I am comfortable to be the Latino that I want to be the queer person that I want to be. And so when we're creating a workforce of culture that has these opportunities where people feel comfortable, in addition to pay, in addition to all of these other things, we really start to see the investment in the individual and starting to see that they want to come back summer after summer. And it also starts with to what we were talking about earlier about shifting this power dynamic and making sure that when you bring these people on, that they have a sense that they can contribute to the power dynamic. And so being mindful of that and acknowledging those opportunities for them to have it and to continue to listen to them and have them be part of the conversation. Because I think it's essential for us to do that. And so if we can continue to build trust from the beginning with the individual, we'll see that happen. We'll see the recruitment and we'll see that come back to us more and more and have them come back to us more and more often.
Yeah, I love that, Sergio. And I think some of what we're seeing with these schools and districts that we're working with in Texas is like this, I don't know, real intentional times 10 focus on like the youth experience. So doubling down on things related to culture and really thinking about like, how can this summer be as enticing and inviting and supportive and exciting, as it's ever been, plus, times 100. And, so thinking about that through, the culture that they're building for their program, we see, from a staffing perspective, a lot of these districts and schools are looking at having counselors on site in the summer, which is maybe not something that they've typically done before. But in a recognition that, students really need a lot of support right now, and to also lighten the load on the teachers and staff from being able to meet all of those needs of a young person. They're staffing up in a way, having folks that are specifically focused on culture, counselors, integrating SEL into their enrichment and having folks that are specifically focused on that. So while I'm not in programs to see what those relationships look like, I see on the planning side this intentionality toward strong, positive relationships between staff and the supports that young people really need and are craving and are going to be important for that success, like you were saying, Broderick.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just super inspired right now and grateful for all the commentary happening in the chat. I don't know if you had a chance to peek over there lately, but I remember a lot of the advancing youth development work initially years ago was about professionalizing the field and that, out of school time job was not just the job you took until your real job came along, that this actually is a career option. And while it may not pay the best initially, if you put, roll up your sleeves and put some sweat equity in, you might be a program director one day, and you might be the deputy director. You might even be the vice president one day, or the CEO. And so just some thoughts there just responding to the chat. But I know it takes a special type of person with those superpowers to connect and create those spaces. Sometimes I hear them called kid magnets. You know, you can't stop young people from coming around you because you create the conditions that make it safe for young people to want to interact with you. And so, who are these folks? How do we find them? What types of people, what experiences are we most likely to recruit into the work to facilitate these summer learning programs? And what can we put in, aside from the dollar amounts, which hopefully we figure out at some point, but aside from that, what can we do to make these opportunities be attractive, a place that folks want to come to and aspire to?
Yeah, well, I have 2 boys. I see lots of kids around, but I'm not a kid magnet. I know what my place is. But in talking with several out-of-school time collaboratives, groups of 30 or so, kind of like Sergio, you have these provider convenings all through the spring. They all just said, I can't get a sign off from the district to know whether I can operate in their school. And I don't know which schools. So they are on hold, from the fall to January, February. I know that there's one city that is going to notify providers at the end of or mid-April, whether they're going to get funding. If you want those kid magnets, those people are in high demand. They're not just magnets for kids, they're magnets for other employers. We need to start recognizing that just like school districts start recruiting for new teachers in February and March, ahead of August or September, we need to give our community partners more time to do that outreach and get the cream of the crop and sign them up. So, when I shared with this group earlier, it hurt my heart when I heard that there are passionate service providers who were notified just a few weeks before Thanksgiving that the school district was going to close for the entire week of Thanksgiving. And they said, we want you to serve the kids all day during the week of Thanksgiving. That's taking the provider for granted. And I'll say it's disrespectful. It really is. We need to treat our community partners as valuable, complementary service providers to what's being done in the classroom. And I know I'm speaking to some of you out there who've experienced that.
Thank you, Rod. Appreciate that. I feel like Andrew might.
Here I come. No, and I, as someone that's in the district, my first instinct was, Rod, connect me with those districts, right? I think we're lagging far behind in our understanding of what we're after with summer learning. For us as a district, this was the crisis for us. We read the research. We read what Katie and her group put out, and we read the literal peer-reviewed research. And then we just asked 2 questions. Number 1, do we believe what this research says? And if we believe it, what should we do about it? And that led to our decision. We have to take it super seriously. So in our position, it's the other way around, that we are trying to push our community to come up. But I'm well aware that for most districts, we're still doing summer school. We're not doing summer learning. We're doing punitive, quote unquote, credit recovery sorts of things. So for me, this needs to be about all of the institutions, particularly schools and districts, understanding the power of summer learning, and then creating the synergy. We know this is our aspiration in our community is we think we can continue at scale, because if our whole community buys into this idea, there are enough resources within the community to do that. So I feel like what Rod is saying is a hard truth, but I don't disagree with him. I think that is, we have to work together. And so for me, then you come to the question of, there are more than enough humans in our community. Are we short employees? Yes. To me, that issue is what can be different? What's the difference about getting people in there? And you know, to the issue of kid magnets, like they're all over. They're all over our communities. And tap into the folks and into the organizations who know them and don't know that these are opportunities are available, et cetera.
I'd love to just kind of expand, I think, Broderick, on the second part of your question, which I think, you know, we started to talk about a little bit earlier about like what can entice folks, like, you know, you want to find those kid magnets, and then how do we get them there? And I think, you know, Andy in the chat specifically was curious about like rural communities. So I can share some of the things that are happening in Texas. Like 75% of the districts involved in this initiative are in, you know, their rural charters or border communities. And so it goes back to what Andrew was saying at the beginning about kind of option and choice and flexibility. So I think we see districts kind of doing innovative things like with their schedule. So they're offering teachers the option that it's going to require getting more people, but who work less. So like providing options to say, you know, you can work half of the program day. So structuring their daily schedule so that you're having like discrete roles at specific times. So a teacher could sign up to work half the day, or doing their program in sessions. So maybe they're working for 2 or 3 weeks of the summer instead of a full summer. Requires some creativity to think about the continuity of experience for the students, but they're finding the ways to do it to make it possible for teachers. So we've seen those kinds of schedule options. Several of the districts are talking about like co-teaching models. So again, it's about lightening that load for the staff. So you have somebody else that is like sharing that work of prep and actual facilitation and leading of activities. And then just that staffing up also provides the chance for like more breaks, more like actual breaks, not the kind of breaks you normally get in a summer program, which then get eaten up by needs that arise, but like an actual break in the day. So staffing for that. And there's one district that also is using some of their funding to provide on-site childcare for staff. So just like trying to streamline that experience for, you know, a teacher or staff member who has, you know, young kids, like have it right there on site. I thought that was really exciting, and what just like a teacher care and staff care strategy to say, like, we see you, we know you're managing your own summer experience with your own family. We want to provide this for you on site. So those are some of the things that we've seen coming out of Texas, which I think are pretty exciting, and we'll learn from it, right? Some of these things might not work or work as well as we hope they will, but I think we're going to see a lot of potential with these kind of creative strategies to staffing.
Absolutely.
If I can also add, I think what I also hear, and I want to encourage everybody to continue to do, and what I do is like, what are the conversations that you're having? How are you stepping out of your office, and are you actually going to the people and to the communities and having a conversation for them to see, is this a program that they really want, you know? And if it isn't, then how are you pivoting in a way to offer something that they actually want? Similarly, when it comes to recruiting staff and labor, you know, continue to have these conversations in the community, and also making sure that your staff is representing or is a representation of the communities that you are doing your programming in. But ultimately are you taking people out to lunch? Are you buying them coffee? Are you really listening to them to see, is this something that they really want? Because we can, you know, assume all we want, but we know what assume means, right? We've heard that phrase before. So a lot of my time is not spent where I'm at right now. It's spent outside on the streets, going into the communities, talking to, and I'll be perfectly honest, sometimes I just walk around and eavesdrop, right? I do that a lot as well, because, you know, if you're listening to the conversation, if you're activating the space that you are in with the mindset of how intentional can I be, then that's where we can start to see this recruitment and retention start to that gap lessen when we're doing that.
Absolutely. It's wonderful to see the parallel. I mean, we talk about all of this stuff in the context of serving young people, that young people will survive and thrive when they feel safe and supported to learn and lead, but also the adults that are in that space as well need to be safe and supported and put in situations to learn and lead. So, you know, in terms of attracting people to the workforce, I think we're all ambassadors of the work. So I know sometimes early on in my career, like talking about being an out of school time provider wasn't the sexiest thing to talk about with your friends. Well, they were doctors and lawyers and all that good stuff. But you know, now it's like, you know, no, like this is an awesome career path. And if you have the wherewithal to serve others, how great is it to serve in this capacity? The other piece is there's something to be said for the gender piece in our field too. How do we get more folks, you know, from the whole spectrum involved in this programming? How do we get more African American people of color in front of folks in that space? Just you know, just trying to call out a lot of different things with respect to how do we recruit. But once we get them into our systems, how do we keep them there? Any thoughts on retention and retaining that quality staff? I know we've experienced sort of the brain drain. You know, you work with someone, they get really great, and then they end up going someplace else, and we have to fill that gap. Any thoughts about what we can do to retain really great people when we have them? Aside from what I saw in the chat, I saw like a 4-day work week, off on Fridays. I'd stick around for that myself personally, but anybody else, please?
Yeah, I'll jump in from a school-based or district-based perspective. So we're scaling large. So just for a little bit of context, like I mentioned, the percentage for students, we have something on the order of maybe 1,200 employees in our whole district of all job types. And we're hiring 500 people for the summer. So it's a huge percentage of our workforce, right? Like job creation. And to be clear, no one is pressured to work. We're recruiting people, we're inviting people. But as one of the strategies we mentioned before, we hire pre-service teachers into teaching roles in the summer. If you're an instructional aide, you can hold a teacher position in the summer, et cetera. So we're very flexible because certification isn't an issue in the summer space. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're flexible about what your assignment looks like. We allow people to, and in fact, we encourage folks to work really in whichever of the programs they're interested in. Some of the things we mentioned earlier, if you have a child, bring them with you to that program instead of a program that is designed for, you know, another school or serve students from another school. Just trying to be really flexible. And then the issue of voice and autonomy. So the teachers help design what they're doing in the space. They help design the program. They help design what's happening instructionally. So there's a great deal of autonomy in respect of the voice of those professionals in the space there. And then one other thing I'll mention is that in our programs, we have program directors and then associate directors. This year, we have a total of 17 programs in our district. Of those 17 directors, about 9 of them have been associate directors before. And then over the last 5 years, as of today, we have 3 principals and 6 assistant principals in our district who have led a program. In other words, this is really great on the job sort of training. Like you get the experience of being an executive. And then the other point for teachers too is if you are interested in growing that skill set, there are going to be opportunities for you. So we're not shoehorning people into something or just or keeping them in a place. We're offering a lot of voice and choice, both in where they're working and then also in the details of the job once they get there.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Great dialogue, great conversation. I'm making sure the save chat button is enabled here to be able to capture all this goodness that's happening in the chat.
Can I just piggyback on what Andrew and Sergio were saying earlier?
Please,
I think that leveraging the teachers is absolutely critical, and the teachers have a very special relationship with the students. But what we find is that the community providers who work with kids after school also have a very strong relationship, and they both feel strong ownership over their kids. And we've learned that in so many different ways. So what I'd like to just throw out is, if we, as part of that collaboration, if we can get somehow the teachers to share with the community partners what they're seeing in the classroom, what is needed to be taught or reinforced, not just academic content, but in terms of socio-emotional, that would go a long way to creating a really strong partnership that provides wraparound support for the students. And that's, I hear providers say this over and over again. We would love to know what's happening in the classroom, what kids are struggling with. If something happened to a student's family, they're acting out after school, but we don't know why. Share information, make it a two-way channel.
absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that, Rod. Appreciate all the insights to this point on this call. If we can move to one of the final questions on the panel today, any advice that you would share? I'd imagine that we've all been in situations where we had to bring staff on board. And I know that one of the things that helped me is hiring for attitude and training for skills. Like it's sort of been a mantra of mine in that space. I can train anyone with a great attitude. But any advice that you have for anyone who's in that situation right now, that you have to, engage in the hiring process and bring staff on for this summer?
I mean, yes, I'm currently in that process. And it's really about having continuous check-ins with the individuals, with the people. And in those check-ins, always coming from, and I continue to say this, of a shifting that power balance. So making sure that their strengths are being recognized up front, that their voice does matter, and that I kind of toss it back to them. I say, I'm not the boss, you are. You need to tell me what I need to do, and I'm going to support that. And so that's how I'm shifting the power balance. And when they start to see that and see that they actually have a voice, and that I'm continuing to check in on them, and not in a way that's like micromanaging, of course, but that is allowing them to bring their voice to the table, is what I'm really trying to say. And so when we continue to do that by shifting that power balance back to them, we really start to see this culture of trust being developed, and that I'm actually knowing how to strategize my work as well, because they're the ones who are going to be in the classroom. They're the ones who are going to be the boots on the ground. And so that is a mindful, a mindset that I go into every time I'm either bringing summer staff on specifically, and then even when they leave, I actually check up on them after they leave for the summer. I continue to check up with them after they have left me for the summer, because I think it's essential to make sure that they are okay moving forward.
Absolutely. Thank you for that insight. I'll also, since we do have another minute or so here, I talk to youth workers quite a bit. And we always get to this place where we understand in theory that youth voice and choice is important, and youth voice and governance of the organization is also very important. Is there any examples of involving young people in either hiring staff or being involved in that onboarding process? Any creative strategies around how we can involve young people's voice as we bring people on?
So this is something that Big Thought does often, and we live in that space of youth voice and youth agency. And what we've done is, we've just sat down with kind of youth panels or a youth group and say, what are the things that you want? And who are the people that you want? And when you're looking at somebody who is quote unquote, facilitating or teaching you, what inspires you? And so we use those conversations to build job descriptions. We use those conversations to build, to recognize the skills within those opportunities that we are trying to fill for those, for that labor. And so when we do that, we that's where we start. And then we also give opportunities when we can for those youth to come on board to actually interview as part of the final interview process, if there's a multiple step, because that also then is allowing them to see how their words are being taken into action. And then when they see the person that they think that would be part of their learning process or a learning process, that's how we're kind of capstoning that experience for them.
I'll just share that a few years ago, we hired a high school student to interview other high school students and ask what they wanted out of their summer. Was it money? Was it to learn something? Was it to just try something different, risk-free? If you want to learn how to cook, whatever. So that's how we did it in order to figure out how to present the best programs to families in order for them to choose what they really wanted. And I know that now we're not allowed to contact young kids directly and ask them if they want to register. But we have a user model where kids who are over age 10, they start becoming very vocal about what camps they want to, where they want to go, what types of things are hecka boring and they really don't want to do. And we believe that influences parents. And then as Sergio was saying, we offer families choice. So for a particular family, we will present like a handful of local free or affordable choices to that family. And then we can see the data and see which one did they pick. And from there, then we have to start doing analysis to figure out why. But at least we can start seeing evidence of choice. And that helps inform what program designs seem to work, what types of activities seem to work, to give families more relevant choices in the future.
Thank you so much, Rod. And thank you to this dynamic panel. I appreciate your energy, your expertise, and insights that you shared on this call. Certainly an inspiring, great conversation and lifting up additional expertise here in the chat. It's like there's two expert panels going on, one here on screen and one in the chat, which we really appreciate. So thank you so much for your time, your energy, your attention, your passion, your presence, for being here. If you're taking the time to listen to this as a recording, you are also awesome. So we appreciate you as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn the microphone over to Aaron. I see he's popped in as we close out this session.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you so much to Broderick and Rod and Andrew and Katie and Sergio. It was so insightful, and your experience is like pouring out through the screen. We know you all are like walking this talk and thinking about these issues day in, day out. And so that's why we wanted to hear from you, and since you know so much. So thank you. And thanks to everyone else who was engaged and participating almost for 2 hours. We're going to wrap up here, just have a few final comments and thank you. So thank you also. I want to mention all these different co-hosts we have, first of all, for this boot camp. These are partner organizations we work with: After School Alliance, Every Hour Counts, Mizzen by Mott, the National After School Association, the National Parks and National Recreation and Parks Association, CCSSO, the Council of Chief State School Officers, and a group called NCASE, the National Center for After School and Summer Enrichment. These are all folks that put their name and help support and create this two-day boot camp. In addition to our other sponsors you've heard from, Scholastic and Renaissance Learning, you'll be seeing. So a lot of folks had to get involved to make this experience happen. It's going to continue tomorrow, again at 1 o'clock Eastern time, and we have great sessions on model curriculum you can use. That is going to be sponsored by Renaissance Learning And then also talking about the federal funding, the government funding that's now coming down, and how to access it and leverage it, and working with government partners and the government funding. Super important. So we hope you'll come and check that out. And just a couple other, final resources that we have. Maybe the next slide here. There's a lot of resources for you to check out. And I know Katie, especially, and InPlay have available, great things that people should use around recruitment and their tools that they offer and examples. So I hope you'll take a look at that. The Wallace Foundation has put out an amazing summer planning toolkit. Huge leader, partner, investor in our space, in our field. And there's a lot, no one has to reinvent the wheel. If you learn anything from this day and tomorrow, is that whatever problems you have, someone else has had them, and whatever solutions you need, we might not have them, but somebody in our field, in our community has them, and we can share that with you. Just a couple other things I think we mentioned coming up. So you've heard a little bit about discoversummer.org. This is an expansion, year 2 of a pilot we did last year. We hope you'll check this out and get involved. We want to test kind of the interest of program providers to getting their programs listed on this, and we're going to be doing a push in the next few weeks. So hopefully we'll put the link in the chat, and we'll send it out too, so you can have your program, entered and listed, and we'll make sure that the resource families hear about. But we only have a few more weeks to get that up and going, probably through April 15th. So if you're interested, please check out the link to Discover Summer and check it out. Check out the site, and then you could put that in, and so people can know about your program. And that we're doing with Rod from InPlay. So thank you so much, Rod, on that. And then just the last few points here. This issue of summer learning, not a silver bullet, one piece of the holistic education experience of young people in this country, but we have moved from a niche issue in education to a national priority strategic response of America. And so that's why there's so much funding. That's why there's so much attention. That's why there's so much focus on how to do it right. And we have a lot of new people entering the space, and we want to help them and welcome them. But we also have a lot of experienced people in our field and space, and we want to make sure we take advantage and learn from them and kind of build on what works, which we have a lot of research to show. So other things coming up again, you'll hear about it again, but National Summer Learning Week, please put that down on your calendar so you can celebrate the good work you're doing. Our national conference, where you'll be with some of the biggest leaders in education across America, and some of you here today, and really connect across domains from all the different silos that we're trying to break through here. And then you have the opportunity to get involved with our learning communities. And then I'll just say here, as you're thinking about your planning, know the numbers of students in your community you want to serve, and figure out how to grow the numbers of students you get to serve this summer. That's what this opportunity and this moment is calling for. Think about how to move from being a rigid program model. We all think our program models are the best and they're great and perfect, but this is a crisis coming out of COVID that asked us to be a little more imaginative, to reimagine and kind of more flexible with what our program models look like, and think about our creative partnerships and move from being a sense of competitive sometimes, especially groups, are we fighting over dollars, or are we able to find a way to share dollars and be collaborative and stretch those dollars? And then the fierce urgency. And now, all of us want to have nice 5-year strategic plans, but this moment requires us to move quick. You leverage this summer, leverage the next summer. That's one of the great things we have before us, is to get things figured out in 2022 that we can keep building on in 2023, and then make the case that we need future investment to continue, because kids need it, and families need it, and schools and everyone wants them. So that's where we are today. We end now. We thank all our panels, the earlier panel with Christina, the panel with Broderick today, all the panelists. We appreciate it. The recording will be made available, but we hope you come back tomorrow, 1 o'clock East Coast time, same Zoom link you have, and we're going to have an amazing panel sponsored by Mott, Ms. and by Mott. And then we talked about the government funding panel sponsored by NCASE. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thanks for your time today, everyone. Be well.